Okay, it looks like it's working. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the live. I have not done a live for a really long time. If you log on, would you let me know if you can hear me? Because I'm not sure how well my sound is working. And I would love to know if you can actually hear me. So that would be nice to know. I'm going to be doing a few things today. I'm going to be having my tea. I'm actually doing iced tea. So I'll go over that with you. I'm going to be making my, how do you say that? Pizzelle? I always say Pizzelle. I don't think that's how you say it. But the waffle cones. This right here is my Pizzelle maker. And I got it at Goodwill. So it was a wonderful find because we use it for a lot of special occasions. And I basically put like a little tablespoon of batter onto it. And then you push it down kind of like a waffle maker. And then you let it cook for, I don't know, like 45 seconds to a minute. You take them off really fast and form them into a cone. And I mean, you could do it as a cookie, like these. You can kind of see the cookies on here. Where are they? There. But I really do like to use them as cones. And then as soon as you make those, so my 8-year-old was so nice as to help me make this, to put the cones in. This is just an old egg carton. We've also used like the cardboard cartons that you might get cherries or strawberries. We've used those and made holes in those too, which works really good. So we're just going to use the egg carton today. We make sure everything's working on here. Okay. So I'm going to turn this on. And then we're going to be talking about sourdough because now is like the best time to be getting sourdough started if you don't have a sourdough. And this heats up pretty fast. I'm going to get my tea. So this is my tea. It is a not coffee tea because I've been wanting coffee lately. But this is Farmhouse Teas. So it's the sugar makers, not coffee tea. And they do like I think they have a chocolate flavored one as well. It has maple and vanilla extracts, and then they use the chicory root, dandelion root, and the carob. And I'm going to make this iced, which is why I had it in my fridge. I just steeped it just using like this normal thing here. And I put it in my fridge to cool it off. And now I'm just going to transfer it over to the ice. Put some milk with it. And then it's kind of like an iced coffee. Not quite, but it's good. So grab the ice. And we can keep going. I'll put a link for the tea in the information box below. See if I can do this without spilling. Got it. And get the milk. I have not done iced tea, like a big thing of iced tea yet this summer. That is on my to-do list because I love being able to do that in summertime. We have, what is it? Lemon balm out front, and it just grows like crazy here. And that is great in like the lemonades that we do or just using for iced tea. So anyways, tea time, but it's really like iced tea time. Okay, so this is probably getting warmed up just about there. This here is my sourdough starter. And let me know if you are here and watching, if you guys have sourdough starters or if you are working on a new sourdough starter. So this one I have had in a quart jar, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about switching over because I'm going to switch with you guys today. Actually, I might do that right now while that is heating up. This one. So you've got two different sizes here. This is a much bigger. This is a 64 ounce. So is that like, I'm trying to think if that's double quart, or if someone knows the math, let me know. I like this one. This is actually, it was a coconut oil jar that I got from Azure when I used coconut oil. And then afterwards, I just washed it out. But I really love the wide rim because it's a lot easier if you're trying to scoop it out, or even using like a measuring cup. That's a lot easier too. But I wanted to talk to you about when you see the buildup coming on the inside of your jar, that is definitely a good sign that you need to switch over, because what you're doing when you start feeding and you're getting the buildup is the buildup attaches the flour that you're feeding to itself. So if you have just an empty glass jar like this and you're putting in flour and water to feed it, and then stirring it up, the only places it can attach itself to is the side walls of that jar. But once you get buildup like this, it's attaching itself to itself, and you're really just wasting a lot of flour, which I don't like to do because einkorn is expensive. And I use einkorn flour. So I'm just going to pour this out. And sadly, because I've let this build up so much, I'm going to be missing out on quite a bit of flour that could have been used if I would have switched this over sooner. I will go ahead and get a knife for this too. But just another thought too, like with this jar, you don't have to go out and buy a great jar. Look at what you're using when you are purchasing items for groceries, because a lot of those can be reused. And keep your eyes open, especially for the wide mouth. When I did the video, just a minute, I'm gonna grab the knife. When I did the video on making a sourdough starter, I started them in really small jars, and I would almost change that now and probably use a larger jar. Of course, you really can't change your videos once you make them, but I think I would use a larger jar just to allow for the growth. And definitely not, what is that, like the half pint. Definitely a pint jar or above, but now I'm starting to get messy. Okay. So I'll see if I can show you this and you can see how much I lost basically. You see how dirty that is in there? So because I did not switch this over sooner, I lost a lot of flour that could have been used in recipes. So that is another thing that we don't talk about a lot. It's like, switching your jars, the sourdough, from jar to jar. But it is important just for trying to get your money's worth from your flour, because flour sticks to itself and it's much more usable if it's sticking to the jar. All right. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comment box and I'll see if I can figure out how it works, because this is all new to me. I'm going to get a new paper towel to put on this and grab a new rubber band real fast. Actually, okay, that's good there. See if I can, whoops. Not sure what I did there. If you are hearing me okay, can you let me know too? Because I just want to make sure that my voice is actually getting across okay. I tend to have problems with the speakers. Okay, I don't see anything at this point, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and start making my waffle cones. I like to use for these, I'll give you a look at this batter too. So this batter does have bubbles in it, but it's mainly just from being stirred a bunch and having baking powder in it. I use about a tablespoon of the batter when I'm putting it on. Open that up, and I'm going to grab another spoon. I like to have a plate also. Having a plate ready to go is helpful just in case you can't get them to curl correctly or whatever. Thinking maybe I will put this over here. And this is thick batter. Like this is, I don't know how to describe it. It's like almost taffy. It's a batter that does not have any oil in it. So the eggs are the only oil. And that gives it its crunchy cracker texture that you need for a waffle cone. But it's pretty thick. And this only takes a few seconds. I did want to cover, though, a few other questions. So I'll go back to the sourdough while we're doing this. I think that, so a lot of the questions that I get for sourdough are about trying to get them started and then having trouble with getting them started. And this is for specifically einkorn. And one of the big differences between einkorn and just modern day wheat when you're doing a sourdough starter is that einkorn does like a lot more food. It doesn't like, so when you make a sourdough starter with modern day wheat, you would do generally half and half as you're feeding it. With the einkorn, you're going to have to do more einkorn flour, and you might even have to do more feedings than you would imagine just to get it going. And one of the ways I like to think of it is when you're feeding your sourdough starter at first, think of it as like a baby and how many times you have fed it in its life. And that is kind of how you're going to think about how mature it is. So I almost forgot my knife. I need a knife too. With a baby who has had, say, like 36 feedings in their life, it's going to be a lot harder to go without food than an adult who's had 3,680 feedings in their life, right? If they go without food for a day or two, still getting water, of course. It's just an example. But if they go without food, oh no, they're not working. What happened here? Something's going on. It's going to be a lot harder for the adults versus the little babies. And so with that, you might have a baby sourdough starter. This one got a little hole in it, but I think it's still going to be able to be used. So you roll it up, kind of like if you're rolling a paper up as a cone. A baby sourdough starter, you can still use it, and it might work after, I think I put 2 weeks on the video after a couple weeks of getting it started and trying to get active. It'll work, but it's not necessarily a really mature starter. So if it went without food for so long, that one's not going to be nearly as strong as another starter that's been going for years, right? It's just not going to have the strength to keep it going. Like, for instance, you could use, let's say you've been making a sourdough starter for 3 weeks and you use it in some pancakes, you use it in some sourdough bread, that works great. But you can't necessarily take that same starter then, and it's good enough to cook with. You can't put it into your refrigerator and leave for, vacation or something, and it might not be strong enough to hold itself in that instance. I hear my phone going off. Just a second. So that is one thing to remember. If you do need to go somewhere and you've got a starter that's not quite mature, see if somebody else can watch it for you, or just decide, I'll see how good it does, and then if it's not going to work, I'll just start over when I come back. But summer is the best time. I'm going to leave this one because it definitely dried. Definitely dried. That's crunchy. The kids will like that one. Summer is the best time to start sourdough starter because of how warm it is. And I feel like a lot of the other messages that I get are messages about starting sourdough starter. Generally, it's in the winter months and it's not working because it's too cold. So there's 3 different things that I think of when I think of things that will change the sourdough starter, and that is the environment, where it's at. I think I have these somewhere. So you've got, if there's any cross-contamination, so making sure that if you are cooking other things nearby, it might not be a good idea to have the sourdough starter right next to your stove in case you are cooking things that are going to cause cross-contamination, because it is an organism and different organisms interact in different ways. The other thing is heat, because if you're starting a sourdough starter, you want to make sure that it is staying active constantly, just kind of like a newborn baby needs food constantly, a lot more than an adult, right? And so that's the same way with a baby sourdough starter. You're going to have to be feeding it constantly. And then the last one was moisture, and that will change a little bit throughout the year as well. I can't say that I've gotten like a for sure moisture level that's good for sourdough starter, but I do know that that does make a difference depending on where you live. And so if you're struggling, you might try a different spot in your house depending on whether it's high moisture or a low moisture area. I don't know, I would say maybe in between. I'm in the Northwest. It does rain a lot here, but we do have hot summers. We do have fires. And right now we have a dehumidifier. Okay, this one's going to work. Get the flower design on the outside here. Okay, there's that one. And these do get hot, so I'm moving my fingers a lot. Not necessarily something a kid is going to want to do just because of how hot it is. But generally, when I do these with my kids, I will do this part and then hand it to them, and they can put it in the hole to keep it in its shape. Let's get that last one out here. Okay. And it takes, I don't know, about 30 seconds for them to cool into the shape that they're going to be in. It's pretty fast. So if you're going to make a cone out of it, you have to know that you're going to do that. Let's keep going. I hope that I'm not missing any questions. I've had problems with live videos before because the chat box, I can never see the chat box for some reason. So someday I will have someone with me who can look at that while I'm doing these videos, but for now it's just me. Get some more on here. I think I'm using a little bit too much even. It's so easy with this, it just spreads out. It's so easy to use a little bit too much. So as far as learning more about sourdough starter, I've mentioned the book before, but there's a book called Sourdough by Science. This is by Karen Lynn Newman, and I am kind of a science geek. I love to know why things do what they do, and it has been extremely helpful, especially with explaining why sourdough works, how it works, the whole thought behind the organisms in sourdough. And it's really made me just understand a little bit more about the gardening world, learning about the whole idea of organisms living on the bran part of your grain, which is why whole grain is going to be a better starter material than refined flour. So if you are using all-purpose einkorn flour, you might want to switch to whole grain flour, and you'll have a lot better result because it's on the whole grains that you're going to find so many more of those organisms, which is what your sourdough is using. So I know some people who, I have my whole grain einkorn starter here, or my whole grain einkorn flour, and then I have the all-purpose right here. I know some people that will just use whole grain for feeding their starter, and then they use the all-purpose generally for their baking, and that's totally okay. And I don't know, I usually do my own grinding of the flour, and so I can't say like personally, but I have heard that there is a definite, like people will notice that the home ground flour tends to be really good for starting their starters, getting their starters active. There's that one. And I've only done the home ground flour for mine. And it does, I do it when I grind my flour because it is warm at that point. And so it's a great time. Whoops, curling it wrong here. It's a great time to start getting your sourdough starter going again. If you're grinding flour, you just toss a little bit in. Do I do all-purpose flour in my starter? Yes, I do, especially if I'm doing baked goods such as croissants. I was doing croissants a lot last year. I was trying to figure out that recipe. I was doing a pound cake that was a very light flavored. It was like a lemon pound cake. So for recipes that are very light flavored, I tend to just do all-purpose. I will try and switch it over. And other than that, I'll use the whole grain, but it kind of goes back and forth which one I do. Okay, let me see what other questions there were on here. Do I need to discard the starter? So when you are making your sourdough, on the video that I have, I'll try and post that down below for making Einkorn sourdough starter. You do want to discard some of the starter when you're first making it because you want to make room for new organisms to come in and feed it. And you don't want to necessarily just leave the dead ones there. At least that's my recommendation, is that you take about a tablespoon out each time you're feeding it when you are first starting it. Other than that, I don't really ever discard. My starter's pretty strong at this point, and so I am fine with leaving it that way. It doesn't cause harm. It means I'm not wasting my starter. I'm able to use it in my baked goods. I'm not wasting the flour. Like I said earlier, I don't like to waste einkorn flour. And so, yes, for discarding a little bit if you are getting a starter started, just a baby. And no, if you are trying to just keep your starter, I don't do it then. And then where to store in the summertime. Okay. Like I said, summertime is great for starting. It's great for starting a sourdough starter because it is so warm. The hard part is it's so warm that we're not baking a lot with it, right? And so we tend to not touch it as much. And if you have air conditioning, it's not going to be that big of a difference for you to just store it normally. But if you are not touching it so much, you're not making it like pancakes or anything like that with it, you can actually store it in the fridge and just feed it once a week to keep it going. Like I said, wait a couple months if it's a baby starter before storing in the fridge, because it's probably not ready until it gets a lot of feedings under its belt. Otherwise, try and find a cooler place in the house if you are just storing your starter. If you are creating a new sourdough starter, you've got a baby, warm places are great because they help to get it going. All right, I'm going to do one more of these. And then I might call the kids in and have them get a little cone. It's really hard to not do too big of those scoops. Okay, I think I had, another thing to make note of is that if you are switching your sourdough starter, or transitioning, I should say, and you're trying to make an Einkorn sourdough starter from it, it's important to remember that different organisms are going to react in different ways to what they're being fed. And so if you have, say, a gluten-free sourdough starter that you want to transition to Einkorn, when you start to transition it, it's probable that it will not be as bubbly, that it will kind of take a break. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to work. Just remember, it will take a little bit for those organisms to get used to what they're being fed. So think of it like a kid that is used to eating carrots. Maybe your kids are not used to eating carrots. That's like the only vegetable that my kids will eat. So that's what I think of. And then you decide to introduce broccoli into it. And they're like, oh, we can't do this. But as you do it more and more, they start tolerating it better. And then their bodies start getting used to it, and it's kind of the same for Einkorn or any other type of, or not Einkorn. It's the same for those organisms on your sourdough starter. They get used to that one thing that you feed them, and then you introduce another one. It's going to make them kind of slow down their activity, but they will come back as they get used to it. So that was my one thing for transitioning, because I gave some sourdough starter to a friend today, and I think she'll just be using normal flour with it, not the Einkorn flour. And so I remembered I better text her afterwards and just let her know that it's still working if you decide to start feeding it and it doesn't look like it's working. It's still working. Just give it some time to get used to whatever flour you're using. All right. Oh, better get this one out. I really hope that I am not missing any questions. So I will go through afterwards and see if there's any questions so that I can respond to them. Ouch, this one's hot. Let me see if there was anything else I missed, and then I'm going to call the kids in and give them these. Okay, I think I've gotten just about everything. All right. I'm going to shut her down for now. Check and make sure. Again, if I am not seeing anything, I will go ahead and just close her up here. So thank you guys for joining. I am working right now on getting, if you've seen the Einkorn for a Winter, Cozy Winter ebook that I've done, in the past few years. I am working on getting that into print. It has, man, I don't remember how many recipes I had in it. I don't know. It had a good number of recipes in it, but I'm looking at getting that into print on Amazon right now. So you'll be hearing more about that soon. And anyways, I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you have any more questions on Einkorn, you can always check through the messenger on my Facebook, or post on YouTube, send an email, that sort of thing. And before the kids come in, I'm gonna have to take one of these myself. As long as I can find the oh my goodness, maybe I can't find my ice cream scoop. And before you guys go, would you go ahead and put down below, if you are using sourdough starter, what do you guys like to make in summer with it? Because I feel like it is something that people don't use a lot in summertime. Sometimes I do make bread still in summertime. I like to do that around cooler days, of course. But I would love to hear what ideas you guys have for using the sourdough in summertime. Obviously, you can still do breakfast things with the sourdough. Do you do sourdough on the grill at all? That would be fun to hear. So I'd love to hear it. And I will talk to you guys again soon, okay? Bye-bye.